Blog Talk Radio. Hi, and welcome to Linda's Spiritual Conscious Talks, and I'm your host, Linda Summers, and we've got a wonderful show for you today. As you can tell, we just played just a beautiful piece of music that we will talk about in the show. But our topic today is the transformational power of classical music with Beate Willma, and I'd like to give you a little bit of information about Beate before we get started with the show. Beate originally trained as a music teacher for grammar schools in Stuttgart, Germany, with a focus on organ, singing, and choral conducting, and then went on to her Master of Music and PhD in Historical Musicology at King's College London, where she also did some teaching. She worked as a production dramaturge for Stuttgart Opera House and then also the Copenhagen Royal Opera in Denmark, and now is further specializing in choral conduct at Odense Music Academy and training as a transformational coach both in Denmark and the U.S. With different ensembles, she has premiered several choral pieces by Hans Erik Philipp, which is a piece you just heard. She is a classical musicologist, choral conductor, organist, and opera dramaturge, and has worked in academic contexts, the church, the opera, and the theater for the past 20 years. She has also worked on the ways in which music touches and transforms the human beings who come into contact with it, and is building this into her emerging practice as a transformational coach. And with that, I'd like to welcome Beate to the show. Hi, Beate.
Thank you so much, Linda. Hi. I'm honored to be here.
So much.
Thank you.
Well, this piece of music, I mean, you know, it's the first I've ever done on a show. And when you sent this to me, it was like, wow, like it does move you. I mean, the emotion and everything. So, but before we even get started, I really would love for you to give our audience the information around, introduce this piece of music to the show and why you chose this piece of music.
Yeah, as you said, the piece is by the Danish very renowned film composer, but he's also writing a lot of classical concert music, Hans Erik Philipp, and I have been having the privilege to work together with him for the past few years, actually. And this particular piece is from a theater production where there was, which had been arranged as serious musical theater. And this, the title of this song is called A Lullaby, and it's sung by the wife of the male lead, but she is not the female lead. She is his neglected wife because he doesn't really love her, and she is singing her child into sleep. But what really comes out is that she's so sad because he doesn't love her anymore, and she knows it, and she loves him, and she can't do any more about it.
Wow. It's such a beautiful piece. It really does. It does really move you. I mean, I think music in general really does move us. But was there a particular reason why you chose this one? Was it just because of working with him?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
because
it
shows so many things at once. For once, it shows that new classical music is being composed, which is not only abstract and incomprehensible and only for specialists, but which speaks to everyone here and now, whoever they are. It's not difficult to experience that piece, and yet which is on a high level. And then, of course, I chose it because it moves you. It moves everyone. And this is a big quality in music. And often when musicians go to music school, it's sometimes actually easy to forget above all the technical challenges. And you put so much time into the technique. Sometimes it gets forgotten, I think, that music is here to move us in the first place and for us to articulate ourselves, but also for the listeners to allow themselves to be moved.
Because I definitely think that music is a way to connect when we really dive into and really listen with our heart, you know, with our ears, but with our heart. It really does open up our heart.
Exactly. I'm so glad you're saying this. Exactly.
Yeah. And you wrote about... you also had talked about how the ancient Greeks wrote about this, how classical music can literally move us. How is that so? I mean, how, like, what did they say?
Yeah, it's so interesting because everyone who knows a little bit about the ancient Greeks will remember there's a passage in Plato, the Republic, and in this whole book he designs his ideal state, and most of us wouldn't agree with his views. But the interesting thing here is that he makes a selection of the different kinds of music, and he calls them musical modes. It's different scales. And it's not so important in this context what precisely there are if we just speak of different kinds of music. And he will only allow in his ideal state 2 of them, because all the other ones will just spoil the people. They will make them weak and not good at warfare, and it's just useless. And this just shows how much he thinks music influences people down to their physical actions.
Right.
And I love that passage because it goes so far back, and we would have probably very different reactions today to ancient Greek music, because it's also a cultural thing, what you connect with a certain way of singing, for example, or a certain piece, even if you have heard the piece before. But it just shows how powerful in his view music is and how much it can do with us. And he believes that.
That's so amazing. I mean, I would never even thought, it's so interesting. I guess that when you think about it, a lot of things go really back to way back in time that we don't even realize, until we start digging further into it and really looking back to see where it really first began. Just
it has been there. Yeah, it has been there all the time. When you read letters by Mozart or letters from his time, people were just crying like children when listening to music. Right. And so it was very, very emotional. And today we have to be cool also, so the way might be a little bit longer, and we have to find new ways. But it has been there all the time. Yeah.
Well, definitely. Well, and I think that, too, that's why I sort of went into silence in the very beginning after the music played, because I feel that to really let that energy really penetrate and really, come into ourselves, and have that connection, such a deep connection with music. I love it.
Yes. Me too.
So powerful.
Thank you for
so
playing
powerful.
it.
Yes, well, you're so welcome. Thank you for sharing it with us. It was just absolutely beautiful. Well, and I also want to talk to you, too, about, because there's 2 different types. You do classical music in coaching and coaching classical musicians. So it's really 2 different, very different ways of coaching, which I think is fabulous. And so can you explain to us about the classical music in coaching and what that looks like for people?
Yes. One day this January, it came to me that I could develop a product I came to call Opera Intensive. And I got the idea because I love classical. I love opera, obviously, amongst many other things. Yeah. And I think it's overlooked sometimes in its immediate force. I mean, there are many opera lovers, and they are sort of opera geeks, and they're even traveling to Milan and traveling to Bastille, to Paris, and traveling to London, other important places to see their favorite operas and know everything about it. But then, of course, opera music has been composed, often you can show this so intently, to move the audiences. Nothing but that, to move the people exposing themselves to it. So I got the idea to use this in coaching, to open up people, to open the channels to their hearts. And I mean, so it builds really on this music moving us. And the other pillar is that all music is musical multimedia, because even if it's not part of a plot, like when you listen to this piece, and we had fantastically enough, we had 5 minutes for it, so there was a chance of getting into the music, and every single listener will have had their own thoughts alongside the music, and that moment it is musical multimedia. So we attach the music to our own thoughts, to something we think of, to our own story, even if we haven't heard it before. And this happens all the time. And this is why people cry when they hear music, because their stories come up. And it's very different for each person. And so apart from that, so there's a Danish, actually a puppet theater company, and they rearrange opera tunes and use it for very different plots, but it works totally effectively using the same melodies for other things. It works. We have this in the whole musical world, like you get the same tune, and sometimes in church sometimes it's a Christmas carol, sometimes it's for Easter, sometimes it's for Long Friday. It's very funny. It's very interchangeable. It works.
Wow.
And this is the meaning of musical multimedia. And then in opera, you have all these amazing opera heroines, and most of them, especially in the 19th century, they are all bound to die because it was part of the genre. They almost had to die. We don't want that. But there are some storylines that modern women can absolutely relate to. And then the greatness of the music opens certainly up for some feelings that are maybe hidden. And I'm working on unlocking that potential of using storylines in opera to for women to identify with and to get into themselves really more, and of course at the same time more into opera. So that's the concept, that's the idea.
What a beautiful way of doing that. I mean, it's fascinating to me. And you also mentioned about projecting one's own plot. Is that what you mean by finding the story, or?
Yes. The plots, you don't need to go far to be able to identify. If I just give some examples, so Bellini's opera Norma. Norma, she is a Gallic druid priestess, ancient antique France. But she is a female ruler. And as such, the opera is written at the beginning of the 19th century. As such, she is investigated and criticized. And basically the plot says, oh dear, when a female is in power, you have only sex scandals. She's in love with the enemy. She has secretly 2 children with him. And projecting the priestess, who is not supposed to have any relationship to the outside world, so she ends in trouble. That's what the opera is saying. We don't like that, but the composer, of course, he got into her way of being, and today's women can identify with it when they take huge responsibilities and have to stand in whatever happens. Right. So it's not so far. Then you have the Countess in Mozart, the Le Nozze di Figaro. It's Figaro's wedding. And the Countess, her husband lost interest in her a little bit, and he's looking after some younger women. And she's so sad because they were the love of each other's life. And people can relate to that when it happened to you, of course, when you're in a similar situation. So some storylines, some elements are certainly transferable. Without that, the whole story needs to fit.
Absolutely, and like you mentioned, it does unbury the emotions of the person in classical music and coaching. You're unburying the emotions in that person.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And I mean, it's very, very new, so I haven't had any actual sign-ups yet. I had some people being interested, and I would really like to encourage anyone who is interested also to contact me to want to be a guinea pig for some smaller unit of that kind, because I need actually people who just feel like trying it out in small bites and experimenting a little bit. Because I need people who have a natural response and curiosity. And the great thing is that if you think it's fascinating but you don't know anything about it, then it's a good way of coming closer to it. So I would like to encourage people just on my website to sign up for a discovery call, and then that's the way to get in contact with me, and then we can talk about guinea pig possibilities.
I love that. Well, why don't we go ahead Why don't you go ahead and give them now your website information, so if they're listening and even after, with the video, they can get in touch with you, because I'll have your information at the end of the video as well. So to be a guinea pig, so to speak. So put your website information?
Yeah, that's just beatewillma.com. So it's BeateWillma.com. And there you have to find opera intensives and just register for a free discovery session. And then we are in contact. Or you can also send me an email there. That's also possible.
Perfect. Well, awesome. I love that. So then now coaching classical musicians is very different from classical music and coaching. Two different.
Yeah, obviously. Yeah. It's all before the stage and backstage, so to speak. It's a different world.
It really kind of sounds the same, but from your description, it's very different. Because you talk about the dreams, the pressure, the possibilities, and creating space for creativity. So how does that look as coaching classical musicians? So you're coaching them on stage, right?
No, not on stage, but I know what they're doing from my background. So I will be a little bit quicker to understand what they mean when referring to certain issues in their lives than someone who has no experience in that area. So as a start, it's of course no different from just plain transformational coaching. It's just my background that makes the difference. And over time, I'm developing tools that are really geared to classical musicians, and I'm becoming very sensitive to typical issues that might arise. For example, obviously every classical musician loved classical music as a child, but now it's getting much more rare to be a performer. Like in 19th century Germany, it was normal that many people played the piano because there was no TV. It was their way of entertaining themselves. In middle upper class, it was a very fine way of, it was a pastime. So people were quite good. Many people were quite literate on the piano. And not so many people are that necessarily today to start with. So classical musicians it's like getting a little bit smaller, and competition is huge. And so it can be the pressure. So, and what typically there is pressure from musicians' parents in one or another way, and of course most parents are so loving and well-meaning, but if you summarize it all, then the child would have preferred to play a little bit more and to practice a little less if the parents weren't there, and if that high level needn't be achieved, obviously. So it is a lot of hard work, especially when you learn an instrument with a lot of practice. And also for singers, the whole personality is in the voice. It's so personal. An instrument, your voice, you can imagine when you're sad, you can hear it straight away in the voice. Your moves, everything. Your bodily shape goes into it, everything. So typically, singers will work deep with all sorts of issues in their lives because they will not be able to move ahead at a certain stage. And then in every artistic career, there are crises. Musicians don't develop in a linear way at all. Maybe no one does, but certainly not in an artistic profession. There will be periods of expansion, of development, and then you will feel stuck and have to solve a new issue, or maybe change your strategy on preparing yourself for the market, on already when being on the market. Is it master classes you focus on? Is it competitions you focus on? Is it projects out in the real world you focus on? Because you only have so much mental energy to give. So it's really, there are important choices to make. And when you have been often very, very closely tied to your parents or to a particular teacher, this has been much of your world, and you are even tied to your instrument a lot. It's like a spouse almost. It's like a very, very close friend.
Right.
So there are a lot of steps to take, and there it can help to have a transformational coach to facilitate those steps and to go through them with the musician, of course.
Mhm. Now, do you have different age groups, or of coaching classical musicians? Does it start at a young age, or is it any age, or do you?
Yes, yes, and they are very typical issues. Like when you work with like 17, 18-year-olds, they are preparing to get into the music academy, and that's just a period of expansion, hard work, success strategies, stage fright, mental strategies. That's typically that. And when they're a bit older, like 25 up to 30, then and it's going well, then they're really expanding. And then they have to make huge sacrifices as to their personal life. There's not much time and energy left for anything else, really. So then it's really how to balance this. And also there are a lot of mental techniques, how to make it more efficient. And it's directing awareness to strategy. And like a typical example is like a music professor might say, oh, you have to believe 150% in yourself. Yes. But how do you get there?
Right. I love that.
Also,
well, we've got about 3 minutes left.
Yes. Sorry?
Oh, go ahead and finish that. No, go ahead and finish. We have about 3 minutes left, and I wanted to ask you a question, but go ahead and finish what you were just saying because it was going to lead into that.
Yes, and later when they're getting out of music academy, that's facing the market, the real world, then they have to let go of old strategies that have been such close friends for more than 20 years often. So they're huge processes because it's quite extreme. It's thin air, it's high pressure, it's at a high level, and it's all their lives they invest. So it's big issues at stake and high concentration.
Yes, I love that. Well, we've got 2 minutes, and so I wanted to ask you, what is one gem that you can share with the audience that has affected you in your own awakening?
That's a big question. I think it's very plain, actually. So there are quite a few people who think that I'm very developed spiritually, but my gem is actually in really looking my issues in the face.
Wow.
It's so plain and simple. And getting down to that and see what is there, what needs to be resolved, what are misleading, damaging beliefs I still have, and open the path for myself. And then it's just pouring out. The rest is not so difficult at all.
Absolutely. So beautiful.
Paving the way.
I love that. Well, thank you again. And what I didn't say is that you're in Denmark, right?
Yes.
Yes, so I didn't say at the very beginning. So thank you so much for joining us from so far away. We so greatly appreciate it, and what just beautiful music and great conversation. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Linda, for having me here. Thank you so much, and doing this in such a great way. Thank you.
Yes, you're so welcome. We'd like to thank all the listeners that joined the show today and all the ones that will be joining us later and watching us on YouTube. We thank you so much. And please follow us, subscribe, comment, and like. And you can join us next week, May 21st, for our next show on Be in Love with Your Life, every minute of it. So thank you again, Beate, so much for this beautiful piece of music, for doing what you do in the world and really just making a difference with bringing music and coaching people and just your gift that you have. So thank you so much. We really greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, and thank you, Linda.
You're welcome. And if you want to get in touch with her to be a guinea pig, so to speak, please contact her on her website at Beate, BeateWill, M as in Mary, A.com, and she will get in touch with you. So thank you all very much. See you soon. Thank you. Bye.